It's May 24th, 2022, and you know why you're here, so let's kick this off right and introduce the players.
Hey everyone, my name is Bigmoran and I make PvP videos.
Hi, my name's TreesapJake, and I also make PvP videos.
That's pretty crazy.
It is crazy
Anyways,
that.
yes, today we're joined by Trill, and maybe you know him from the AWC, maybe the Race to World First, or maybe you don't know him at all, but to some, he is Mr. Warcraft. Anyway, Trill, how would you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, I'm Trill. I've been playing WoW for a very long time, but I've been playing competitively since 2016. Um, I stream a lot as well, and I play in tournaments. I play with Team Liquid in AWC.
That's amazing. I honestly, dude, you are incredible in my eyes. That's that's my humble opinion. Big, are you there?
Oh yeah, sorry. Oops, Mic was muted. So normally on this podcast, what we like to do, we like to start things off with a little bit of what we've been up to in the last few weeks, which we can talk about what we got from our loot boxes, what's been going on in real life. So Trill, what have you been up to the past few weeks?
Loading sockets from my box. Um, but I've just been actually playing a lot of TVC in preparation for Wrath of the Lich King outside of prepping for the AWC. After the race was first concluded, I've just been doing the farm raids and then just PvPing basically.
Nice. And just out of curiosity, what do you think you're going to be playing in Wrath Lich King?
I want to play a lot of warrior, and I want to play a lot of holy pally and disc priest. Actually, I think all those classes are really fun. I think warrior really gets unlocked in Wrath with the amount of utility you have, and things like Bladestorm are really fun to press.
Yeah, and I think too people tend to forget about unrelenting assault. You know, the double mortal strike effect you can stack. And waves are pretty scary. I mean, I remember dabbling a little bit on some other servers that might not be Blizzard endorsed, but waves are pretty good on those servers. So
Yeah,
yeah, definitely a good choice.
yeah, especially
Um,
toward
oh,
the end, warriors get really strong.
oh yeah, yeah, Shadowmourne. Hell
All that
yeah,
armor, all the armor pen.
yes, that's right.
Yeah, I don't
But
know.
it
I was gonna say I'm gonna be a blood DK with Shadowmourne because I'm gonna be greedy. That's what I'm
um,
looking forward to.
Very nice. I think just me personally, since we're on the topic, I'm stuck between playing probably mage or priest. Because I think I mean I would play druid, but not having the spell will probably feel really bad. So it's like I should probably just play priest then. But if I don't want to heal, I think mage seems like a pretty good option. I mean you can't really go wrong playing mage in any expansion. Seems like
Pretty much.
um yeah. But Jake, what have you been up to the past 2 weeks?
Oh man, you know me. I've been grinding it hard as much as possible. I didn't get anything great in the loot boxes other than, as Trill said, just farming those sockets. Really, I've got too many ults. I should really play a main. It's just it's just one of those things. You know, like I don't know about you, but on EU it's a little bit dead in the scene. It's very quiet, so I have to really wait until like either deep in the evening or certain times of the day to actually get some queues in. So I just end up getting bored and I start gearing new characters. So that tends to happen. But yeah, that's pretty much me. What about you, Big?
I haven't been playing too much WoW. I was playing my priest last week. Been doing some more real life stuff recently. Um, that's just this is a random thought, but I got an automatic cat feeder, which is very exciting. It's like having a weak aura for your pet. You know, you just the game plays itself. You don't need to put the food in the bowl. The food goes in the bowl automatically. So it's been pretty nice having that adaptation in real life. Um, so yeah, it's again not too much WoW. I did play my Holy Priest, which has been it's really fun. I'm not very good at it. I mean I'm okay. I think it's impossible to be bad at Holy Priest at this point. Right? You just as long as you're pressing at least like three of your buttons, you can do okay every game.
Yeah.
But in any case, of course I still enjoy WoW. Just been playing a little bit less these days.
So rolling ahead across the keyboard, playing Holy Priest.
That's right. That's the strat.
Almost
That's
like
it.
BM Hunter.
Almost.
Almost.
The BM Hunter of healers.
Exactly.
I hear that one. The next segment, we're going to play a little game we like to call Need, Greed, Pass.
So in this segment, if you've been a listener of the podcast before, you might know how this works already. But we're gonna post a scenario when you have three, and you're gonna have three options to pick, and they're all gonna be related to WoW. And since the topic of this week is Outlaw Rogue, the question will be directly related to, well, you guessed it, Outlaw Rogue. And so we're going to give you three options. One of them you're going to have to need on, which is, your best pick. One of them you'll agreed on, which is your second choice. And one of them you'll pass. So, Jake, what did you cook up for us this week with the need, greed, pass?
Yeah, so I was thinking, we're talking about Outlaw Rogue. So I thought, why don't we take some of the essential rogue, I suppose, cooldowns that you could add to your class, like anything, like either as a rogue, like what's the most important thing, or if you could add it to your class, like another class, you say, I don't know, like let's say you main Windwalker, or if you're maining, I don't know, like Warlock or whatever. If you could add this to your class, would that make you better? What would be your need? What would be your greed? And what would you just I don't need it. So it can be from any point of view, whether it's a rogue or any other class.
So, since Trill mains Windwalker Monk, he's going to have options. He's going to have three options. He's going to choose which one he's going to want to need on, which one he's going to greed, and which he's going to pass on for Windwalker. So, what three abilities are you going to? I guess Jake, what three abilities are we going to have to choose between for this week?
Yeah. So the three I've chosen are Evasion, Cloak of Shadows, and Vanish.
Ooh.
All right. So Trill, which if you're on your Windwalker Monk right now, you could add You could add one of those abilities to your spellbook. Which one would you need? Which one would you greed, and which one would you pass? So Evasion, Cloak, and Vanish.
I would definitely need Vanish. Vanish on Rogue right now is just so crazy, the amount of things that it does. It's not only one of the most powerful defensive abilities in the game, but it also, due to legendary, resets the cooldowns of all your other abilities. So that one's an easy pick for me. I think I would probably greed Evasion and then pass on Cloak. Like at least for like Rogue and Monk specifically, like because Monk already has diffused magic, right? So kind of okay in that department. But I kind of just die to all the melee claves, so having Evasion there would be kind of nice. And then even for Rogue, it's itself Cloak. I mean, it's not on Restless Blades, the other two are. So I have 100k HP. I don't need Cloak anyway.
Very nice. And Jake, you play Elemental Shaman primarily, or you guys just DPS Shaman in general? What would you choose out of those three abilities?
I think for me, Evasion would be amazing, allowing me to sort of tank more melee. I feel like that's the thing I tend to struggle with. I'd probably say, I don't know. This is what I've been thinking about. It's kind of definitely needing Evasion. I'm not sure about Cloak or Vanish for my greed. I feel like if I could just suddenly disappear and my cooldowns were reset, like not obviously that requires the legendary, but let's say I could just even disappear, that would be kind of cool. But I don't know whether or not it would sort of like suit my play style. I think I'd probably have to go with greed on Cloak just to sort of like have, like I put grounding out and then I've got Cloak as well in between the grounding, just to be super annoying to all those Destro Lock Frost Mage players out there having a lot of fun on the ladder. So I think that's what I'd go for. And then I'd probably pass on Vanish.
Okay, so I actually have, we all have different answers. So I'm just thinking from like a Resto Druid perspective. I think I would actually need on Cloak. I think Cloak is it would be a very dynamic ability to have on a caster DPS, specifically a healer, because you could in theory immune interrupts. I think you would be able to cloak an interrupt. I don't know how that would exactly work. But Cloak would be my first pick, so I need on Cloak. And I think I would greed on Vanish. I think having Vanish as a Resto Druid would be really good. I mean, you are relatively squishy. You can, with outside of Tranquility, you can die pretty easily. So I think having that guaranteed save would be really good. And then I'd just pass on Evasion because, I'd just go Bear Form anyway. And pretty much insane damage reduction against physical DPS in most cases. So yeah, I think it's interesting. We all had different answers, but I think yeah, Vanish on a Windwalker sounds pretty broken. I think that maybe they need that. They're pretty squishy too, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think Shamans. You get tunneled by melee and that sucks. You have to pop that evasion, and
Pop that
yeah,
evasion. Yeah.
and I'd cloak a CS. I'd go in for clones and cloak to land those clones. So yeah, and
Yeah,
of course, yeah.
if you're playing Feral Affinity, you can vanish for another Rig Stun. That's
That's
not bad.
that. That's right. Yeah, that's the one thing about Feral Affinity. It feels lame if you're playing Tauren because you can't Shadow Meld re-stealth. It's infinitely more fun having Shadow Meld just re-stealth Rake, and so if you had that as a Tauren, that'd be the money. Again, if you're listening at home or wherever, feel free to let us know what you'd pick between those abilities. You can type in the Twitch chat or type in the Warcraft Radio Discord. Lots of places you can play this little game every week with us. But speaking of what's to come, Jake, why don't you kick it off with letting the viewers know about what's coming up in the WoW PvP scene?
Get in there and fight! Stop hiding!
Yeah, so starting off, as per usual, there is Dalaran Gaming hosting his 5v5 1v1 duels. So that's teams of 5 in a 1v1 duel style, Pokemon style, 1 by 1, running in, killing each other, the usual. So keep an eye on that. And if you want to know more, you go to twitter.com/Dalaran_Rogue. Flargnus is also hosting another 3v3 tournament on May 28th. That's 6 p.m. EDT. Is that Eastern? I don't know these.
Eastern time, yeah.
Yeah, the Eastern time. There we go. That's a $1K prize pool and growing apparently. So I think we've got a Discord link for that. That'll be posted in the notes, so you'll be able to find that out. Or go to Flark's Twitter. I think he's probably got one. In terms of the Blizzard official events, we've got, I think, May 28th, the same as the 3v3 tournament. The AWC starts, so obviously top 8 teams from NA and EU to battle for one spot at the grand finals. And I think the 8th to the 10th of July is the MDI Global Finals, and the 16th to the 17th of July is the AWC Grand Finals. So lots of exciting stuff. Lots of exciting stuff for you there, Trill, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Pumped?
Yeah, it's exciting to get back into it again. It's been a couple of weeks since the last cup, so it's gonna be fun to see where we stand.
and I think just the other day, didn't Blizzard announce that they're gonna potentially do a global final between NA and EU? I swear I'm not crazy. That was in a blog post too.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing a
I saw that.
cross-region tournament.
Yeah, that's pretty intense because I know. I mean, me personally, as a WoW esports fan, that's kind of been one of the more demoralizing parts of COVID. Despite all the other things, COVID sucked for many reasons, but of course, one reason it sucked is that we lost having lands and that competition between EU and NA. So I'm glad to see that part of WoW esports come back because I think there's always that question, right? Who's the better region? And of course, at least Trill and I are probably NA fans over here, and Jake, I'm sure you're an EU
I'm smelling some bias
diehard.
here.
Yeah, there's some
Smelling some
biases
bias.
here, but it's always fun to have that cross-regional rivalry. I've always loved that part of WoW esports, and again, I put out a tweet the other day. I'm like, who would win in this? If there was a global finals, who'd be the best teams? And to me, I think the competition right now is so insane in both regions that honestly, it's like completely up in the air. If you ask me.
Yeah, no, for real. And you know what? Thinking of that, it always made me sad when I think, how there's lots of teams in Korea and China and Oceania and all around the world. It's sort of like, I know that Oceania plays with US, but it'd be amazing if there was just more teams. We could have more regions in the same way that sort of League has had quite a lot of success with that, with sort of like the NA, EU, Korea and China sort of brackets sort of being sort of quite dominant and just being able to play one another. It'd be great if there wasn't just the UNA. It'd be amazing to have kind of like a world of Warcraft final. You get what I mean? Like that would be cool.
Yeah, for sure. Just out of curiosity, Trill. I mean, do you follow the esports scene in EU at all? Do you watch the EU Cups when they get broadcast?
Oh yeah, I mean, Kangara looks unstoppable. They look really, really strong. They won
Yeah.
three out of 4 cups as well. I'm playing sub RMP. Looks really good. They look really good on it. I wonder if they'll pivot to Outlaw as well, though. I mean, maybe they don't have to, but if other teams on EU have switched to Outlaw and they have to adjust as well, that may be an interesting shakeup over there too.
It's funny. I was actually talking to Bigmex. He plays Survival Hunter in EU, and he recently got rank 1 on the ladder on NA. And in some way, the conversation turned into talking about Outlaw Rogues, and he said that in EU, like some of the Outlaw Rogues, like that are from the French servers, play on like 4 ping or something, like it's incredibly low MS. And he was saying how like Outlaw Rogues are infinitely more scary in EU if they're from France for whatever, because they just have like 4 latency. I'm sure you get more. You somehow probably get more cooldown reduction because of latency in some way.
Yeah, well, you could
That
maybe get more
explains it.
spell casts off if you're clipping your global starter.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of goofy. Anyway, today, of course, we're going to be talking about Outlaw Rogue, which has become a very popular spec. It's had arguably a enormous rise in popularity in the past patch, since the patch was released in 9.2. And we haven't really talked about Outlaw Rogue before on this podcast, and I'm sure a lot of people have questions about the spec. And that's obviously why you're here. We brought you on because you're an Outlaw Rogue expert. And so we just want to ask you, what is making Outlaw so special in 9.2, and why are people suddenly playing it, Trill?
Well, it's mostly a combination of a lot of cooldown reduction with the double legendaries. So the Kyrian legendary for rogues makes so that Echoing Reprimand ammo charges 4 combo points rather than just 1. And Outlaw works off of that by reducing the cooldowns on your abilities based on combo points spent. And since you're spending 7 combo points 4 times instead of 1, and then reducing the cooldown of that ability by up to 35 of its 45-second cooldown, you can start to see where that becomes kind of crazy.
Yeah,
And
so
yeah,
yes, so
go ahead.
Outlaw has a lot of different forms of cooldown reduction, and if there's anything we should learn from, or we should have learned from BFA, is that cooldown reduction is pretty broken in WoW. You know, in a game that's kind of increasingly revolving around cooldown trading, having lower cooldowns than your opponents and being able to reset your cooldowns is pretty broken. So there's 2 ways you can reset cooldowns. There's, well, 3 ways actually. Maybe I'm missing one. But the primary ones are Restless Blades and True Bearing. So can you explain maybe how each one of those cooldown reduction effects work?
Yeah, so True Bearing actually just kind of doubles the effect of Restless Blades. But what Restless Blades does is for each combo point that you spend, it will reduce the cooldown of most of your abilities by 1 second per combo point spent. And True Bearing, the Roll the Bones buff, will make that 2 seconds per combo point spent. And again, since both rogues play Kyrian, your finishing moves, if you hit the blue combo point, will be doing 7-point finishers. So 7 to 14 seconds off of most of your abilities each time you use a finisher.
That's pretty crazy, you know,
That's
and
nuts.
especially since like you can generate combo points pretty quickly too. I mean, that's another big part of it. I mean, not just Kyrian, but I think you have. I mean, we're going to be talking about talents here in a second, but you have multiple ways to just instantly generate combo points, or at least generate combo points really quickly. Is that correct?
Yes, Outlaw has the most consistent combo point generation of any rogue spec. Sub has the highest point generation during Shadow Dance, and then Assassination has the slowest combo point generation because of the slow nature of the spec. But Outlaw is the quickest rogue spec, and again the most consistent in generating combo points.
Nice. And some people, you know, for better or worse, have kind of come to associate Outlaw with being a very defensive spec. I mean, I think each of the rogue specialties right now sort of offers something unique, right? I think rogue is one class for sure where, you know, the sort of class fantasy and class identity is pretty obvious and like telegraphs really well with gameplay. So how do you think Outlaw kind of fits in with, you know, rogue in general? Like, how would you describe Outlaw as a spec overall?
Well, excuse me. Rogue in general is generally viewed as a kind of squishy and a class that can run away very easily, but also is very lethal when they're actually in the field. So they're kind of balanced in that way where when when they're in, they're very scary and you're afraid of them, but then they start to run away because if they don't, then they're in trouble. Then they're really exposed. But in the current state of rogues, the only spec that really does that is subtlety. The other two specs are very in your face, and they have very high bursts. Like assassination and sub have very burst, whereas outlaw is kind of different. That it doesn't have very high burst at all. It has very high consistent and sustained damage, and it's also very defensive. So they're not actually very scared at all. They run at you the whole time instead of running away from you. So in that way, people have kind of had to relearn how to play against rogues sometimes, where you're used to them just running away and resetting all the time, but now you're the one trying to run away and reset to get away from them and try to slow them down a bit.
Yeah, and I mean I know you've played many different melee DPS throughout the years, and Outlaw Rogue. I don't know how long you've been playing Rogue in general, but I know Outlaw Rogue is a recent pickup for you. I mean, how do you feel it compares to some of the other melee that you play? I know you were playing Windwalker. What made you shift to Outlaw Rogue in 9.2?
Playing Windwalker this patch, it was decent. In the current in the last meta that we had before everything shifted, it was decent. Worked for us. We had one cup win, and then I saw Outlaw very high on the EU2 slider again this season, and I started to think, maybe that would be fun. And I wanted to pick up Rogue by the end of the season anyway, regardless of what happened in the AWC. So I said, you know what, I'll just start playing it right now, see what happens. Maybe it'll be fun. So I started playing Outlaw. Outlaw has been the spec of Rogue I've always been most comfortable with anyway. So it was just an easy swap for me. I started playing it. I was like, wow, this spec is just so powerful right now with everything that it does. So I started playing it. I'm like, you know what? Why don't we just try this in threes with just if it's just a better Windwalker, why wouldn't I just play that instead? So we started playing it, and very quickly within 3 sessions we were the highest team on the ladder. So it was that is the best we have done with any spec ever. So kind of crazy.
Very nice. Jake, I'm sure you obviously play a lot of arena. How do you feel about Outlaw Rogues suddenly becoming more popular?
It's interesting. And pretty much, I mean, I've been playing a lot of DK and actually a fair bit of Windwalker recently, and I find, especially in twos, I just can't go them. Like, there's just no way. Like, it's impossible for every single go. They'll have evasion and they'll have cloak and they'll have everything. So it's far easier for me just to run down like a healer or a second DPS. And to me, they're sort of like they're the real tanks. I find it very hard to kill them. And if I do kill them, it's either the stars have aligned or I've suddenly developed some sort of like giga brain, and that's always worked out for me. But no, they're interesting, and I've always found like since they changed combat in Legion to Outlaw, I always thought it was like really interesting. The sort of like the style of and the gameplay in that it is more of like an in your face. It's kind of like a squishy warrior with that sort of consistent damage and sort of the skills that rogues have. Rather than the sort of like subtlety Asa sort of gameplay, and I think that they're really just it's an interesting way of doing it. I mean, I feel like there's some things at the minute that feels like quite ridiculous. Obviously, as someone that doesn't play, a spec that goes very well into it, or like a sort of like a strong spec at the minute. It feels quite impossible, but I know that the gameplay seems really fun. That's why people are playing it. And to be honest, that was a question I wanted to ask you, Trill. Are you enjoying it? Are you actually enjoying playing Outlaw at the minute?
Yeah, Outlaw has been really, really fun to play. Like just constantly having something to press at every global. It is the highest APM spec of the game due to how high uptime Adrenaline Rush has because it reduces your global cooldown. So Rogue already has a 1 second cooldown, and then it's reduced to either 0.7 or 0.8 with Adrenaline Rush. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, it also has so many buttons that are off global. So yeah, it's the fastest pace spec in the game. So it really requires you to keep up with it when you're playing it.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I feel as if most of the better sort of designed classes at the minute people are having a lot more fun with. I guess it's why people are having a lot of fun with Holy Priest and sort of Outlaw, because it's just the way that it's designed. And I kind of wish that every class had this sort of like combination that made it really fun to play. Like, for example, I love Elemental Shaman so much. I think it's really fun to play at the minute, like really, really fun. But it feels like it's probably hasn't got the right toolkit for this meta right now. But it feels really fun to play with, and I feel like there are a lot of classes out there that just don't have fun because the toolkit is just so clunky. But I'm glad that you're having fun on Outlaw, because it sounds amazing. It's I know if Venruki's gone and swapped to it as well, like there must be something fun about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, while it's fun for the person playing, it's usually not fun for the other person on the other team.
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting you mentioned APM, because I think that's a subject that a lot of people don't really consider when they're talking when thinking about World of Warcraft game design or balance. I think so. A lot of classes that or a lot of specs that are kind of broken right now, or that have been broken in Shadowlands, are specs that benefit a lot from APM. So a really good example is like Holy Priest. So Holy Priest Guardian isn't on the GCD. Serenity is. So like a big combo is Guardian Serenity, and being able to do that really fast, like seamlessly. I mean, you could, in theory, just macro it, but if you're able to do those two buttons really fast, I mean, that's you have like a distinct advantage. And I think even greater, I'm pretty sure Greater Fate isn't on the GCD too. So there's like a
Correct.
lot of combinations of buttons you can just press as Holy Priest in these really clutch situations. Like maybe you're coming out of CC and you need to top your teammate really quickly. You could Greater Fade Guardian Serenity in one global, but obviously that requires like insane APM. And on the caster DPS side of things, fire mages are another spec that require a lot of APM. Like if you really want to play optimally on fire mage, you have to be really precise with when you're pressing, for instance, fire blast, because fire blast isn't on the GCD. And there's a lot of precise timing involved with a lot of classes, and it just so happens that those classes happen to be really good, like Outlaw
Yeah.
Rogue, Fire Mage, Holy Priest. But no one really thinks about APM when talking about WoW. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, WoW's 1.5 second globals, between haste and this for that really are kind of slow, because there's not like, you think about a game like StarCraft, right? Like there's no global cooldown. There's just mechanics. There's just how fast you can move, click your mouse, stuff like that. So, you know, whenever there's actually like a limit to how many buttons you can press every second, then it's usually not a large topic. But I mean, in this case, there's so many buttons to press all the time. They're constantly coming back up. It becomes maybe difficult for some people.
Yeah, and I think ultimately what tends to make specs seem pretty fun is like these maintenance things that the specs need to do. Like, for instance, on Outlaw Rogue, you have Slice and Dice you probably need to keep up. You have Roll the Bones that you need to kind of manage. You have pistol shot procs if you're playing with quick draw. There's a lot of things that you can kind of do that are maintenance things and reactionary things that I think it makes the spec feel very sort of like interactive. Is that sort of the feeling you get when playing Outlaw? Is it a very interactive spec?
Yeah, there's a lot of upkeep, a lot of things to worry about maintaining, like Between the Eyes as well as another debuff that increases your crit chance on the threat by 20%. And if you're playing Ghostly Strike, that's another 10% damage increase. So yeah, that's four things right there to manage all the time, on top of all the cooldowns that you're already managing. So there's definitely a lot to pay attention to,
Yes.
which will keep you engaged the whole time.
Yeah, and it's interesting you just talked about Ghostly Strike, but because what we typically like to do on these segments where we talk about individual specs is we like to go over the builds and sort of the talents and what makes the spec work. So I guess let's start talking about that side of things. Um, and if you're following along at home, I recommend for this section you probably pull up the Outlaw Rogue talent calculator on Wowhead or the official WoW website, because we're just going to go over each row individually and talk about what you should be picking. So let's start off with the level 15 tier. I think this tier is actually pretty interesting. So your options are Weapon Master, which gives you, additional chance for Shadow Strike to hit, Quick Draw, which gives you a proc of Pistol Shot, that deals additional damage, and Ghostly Strike, which is a cooldown that increases your damage done to the target by 10%. So, just out of curiosity, Trill, which one of those talents are you primarily running these days?
Well, I'm primarily running Ghost Strike because Ghost Strike is reduced by Restless Blades, like we talked about earlier. So that plus the Vanished Legendary, which I'm sure we'll end up talking about eventually, means that Ghost Strike will be up most, if not all the time, depending on how much uptime you have on your target or what buffs you have. So permanent 10% damage, pretty good. The other options on this row aren't that good. Quick Draw is probably the most common secondary pick due to how common of a pick the Greenskins legendary is as well. And you need to run this talent if you're running that talent or that legendary. I'm sorry, because the pistol shot proc already exists as a passive in the spec, but this just amplifies it and makes it do 50% more damage. But by itself, pistol shot is not a very strong ability. But since you're stacking a 300% modifier on top of a 50% modifier, it starts to do a lot of damage. So that's why that talent is popular. Weapon Master isn't really used at all.
Very nice. Yeah, I think the level 15 talent choices are pretty interesting. For the level 25 tier, you have a few options, and I think primarily you play with acrobatic strikes. Is that correct? That's increases the range on all of your melee attacks by 3 yards. Is that what you're playing, or are you playing retractable hook?
No, we're mostly playing acrobatic strikes. That's kind of Outlaw's signature passive right now. And what separates it from other melee is that extra melee range. Being able to run over and kick somebody before they think you're in kick range, or landing a quick kitty shot or a gouge or something like that. You know, even meleeing another melee outside of their own melee range. It's definitely a unique passive.
Very nice. Jake, do you have the talent calculator open?
I do
By any
indeed,
chance?
yeah. I do.
Nice. Okay, so what about why don't you take it for the level 30 and
Yeah.
35 tier?
Well, I mean, this one I've definitely suffered upon, but you've got Vigor, which is obviously increasing your maximum energy by 50 and your energy regen by 10%. You've got Deeper Stratagem, where you get a maximum of 6 combo points, and obviously your finishing moves deal 5% increased damage, and then the classic Mark for Death. I have a feeling Deeper Stratagem might be the one that you go for, but what do you usually take here, Trill?
So if you look at other rogues on the ladder, you'll see most of them, if not all of them, actually pick Deeper Stratagem. Since it affects kidney shot, so it makes kidney shot last 1 second longer. However, in PvE content, raids, dungeons, etc., Outlaw Rogues actually pick Mark for Death. And the reason for that is because Mark for Death is also affected by Restless Blades. So it says it's a 1 minute cooldown by default, but it actually ends up being as low as 10 seconds, I think. I think I even cast the one as low as 8 seconds cooldown. 8 seconds, 5 combo points every 8 seconds. Imagine that.
Wow.
So, when I play Mark for Death, what actually happens is the cooldowns of all of my other abilities are much lower because I'm casting many more finishers than other rogues. But there is a trade-off, right? There's a trade-off of CC. My CC isn't as long because I don't have that 1 second longer on kidney shot. But since you're actually using most of your combo points that are anima charged, because you play Kyrian, you actually don't even necessarily lose out much by not having that 6th combo point that Deeper Stratagem gives you for the extra 1 second cooldown reduction from Restless Blades. So there's kind of pros and cons, I guess, to this row.
So
That's
I was gonna say, just to add a little bit of context, I saw a Twitch clip of you having a 12-second cooldown on evasion, and so again, Outlaw Rogue is all about cooldown reduction, and so you have a few different things that reduce your cooldowns, and so Mark for Death just gives you 5 combo points basically for free, and so you can get 5 seconds off of your cooldowns. And right, so you were able to get the cooldown of your evasion all the way down to 12 seconds, and that's only possible with Mark for Death. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah, you would have to get incredibly lucky as Super Stratagem to have that. Now, the difference won't be that large, but you won't see an extreme like that with Deeper Stratagem.
Very nice. Jake, what about the level 35 tier? Can you talk us through those options really quick?
Yeah, so we've got on that row Iron Stomach, which increases the healing you receive from Crimson Vial, healing potions, and health stones by 30%. The world famous Cheat Death, fatal attacks instead reduce you to 7% of your maximum health. For 3 seconds afterwards, you take 85% reduced damage and cannot trigger more than once every 6 seconds. And then Elusiveness, which is faint, also reduces the damage you take from non-area effect attacks by 30% for 6 seconds. Which one do you take here, Trill?
So the default pick is usually Elusiveness. This is because not only is Faint by itself a strong defensive cooldown, 30% damage reduction for 6 seconds is pretty good, but also we haven't talked about PvP talents yet, but there's a PvP talent that affects the cooldown of Faint, which also affects evasion, but it makes Restless Blaze reduce the cooldown of both evasion and Faint, so you could have 100% uptime on Faint if you're not CC'd as an Outlaw Rogue, which is, is kind of like one crazy interaction about Outlaw as well. Now, again, about PvP talents, there's a PvP talent that affects Crimson Vial for Iron Stomach. It makes Crimson Vial restore 5% more health and also restore a portion of that to allies within 15 yards. I think it's 60% of its healing to allies within 15 yards. And if you take Iron Stomach, it actually modifies that and makes it slightly more. So there's a little bit of synergy there. I really only play Cheat Death if I play into a Step Rogue. And the reason for that is because most of the time you're going to be CC'd before you could press Faint anyway. So having as much health as you do, playing Cheat Death just increases the likelihood that you'll leave the stun and be able to press, Evasion, Cloak, Banish, etc.
Very nice. And I'm glad you mentioned that interaction with Iron Stomach. I was in a call the other day with Jax, and we were theory crafting. And we're like, maybe Iron Stomach is pretty good. Like if you play with the PvP talent called Drink Up Me Hearties, as you said, Crimson Vial will heal more, and it'll actually heal your ally. And it's kind of funny because I think it works with Kyrian Potion. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure it does. I'm sorry, Iron Stomach works with Kyrian Potion. I'm not exactly sure, but it was just kind of funny because your Outlaw Rogue can heal you, which is just a bit of a goofy interaction.
Yeah.
And it kind of plays into this whole idea that Outlaw Rogue might be a bit of a dampening spec, but no big deal. I think just moving on to the next talent tier. The level 40 talent tier is where I think a lot of the sort of the identity of Outlaw Rogue kind of gets solidified. So you have Dirty Tricks, where Cheap Shot, Gouge, Sap, and Dismantle don't cost energy. You have Prey on the Weak, which targets affected by your Cheap Shot or Kidney Shot take 10% additional damage. Then you have Blinding Powder, which reduces the cooldown on Blind by 30 seconds and increases its range by 15 yards. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Blinding Powder is pretty much the whole talent.
Yeah, I don't even look at the other two talents on this row. That's basically one of Outlaw's main strengths is that blind range and the low cooldown.
Yeah, that's in a game where that's dictated so much by cooldown trading. If you can have a disjointed cooldown, it seems pretty good. And having 30 additional seconds off your blind and having its range be increased, it kind of makes you very unpredictable. And I think from what I've seen in the games people have played against Outlaw, I'm not trying to make people seem bad or anything, but healers tend to forget about this talent. They know that Outlaw Rogues have reduced cooldown on blind, but it's always a surprise. It's like, oh damn, like I thought it was still on CD. So I think that's like an insane part of the Outlaw Rogue toolkit. But moving on to the level 45 tier, so You have a few unique options here. You have loaded dice, which when you use Adrenaline Rush, your next roll of bones will give you at least 2 roll of bones procs. You have Alacrity, which over time is a stacking buff, which your finishing moves have a chance per combo point to grant you 2% haste, which stacks up to 5 times. And then you have Dread Blades, which is kind of an all-in talent where you sacrifice some of your HP for increased combo point generation. And correct me if I'm wrong, but most people play Alacrity. But do you see a purpose for the other 2 talents on this tier?
Yeah, so Alacrity is the default choice for Kyrian, due to the just not needing Dreadblades as much, pretty much. And the reason why Dreadblades is not picked as Kyrian, or sorry, I kind of got mixed up there. Dreadblade is what you play as Venthyr if you decide to play Venthyr Outlaw. Just because Flagellation is kind of weak on its own, but when you pair it with Dreadblades, it becomes actually a really, really powerful offensive cooldown. And their cooldowns are similar enough that you can use them together. So um, that kind of lines up there. But no one really uses loaded dice just because of how good their 2 talents are.
Okay, yeah, I know Outlaw. Yeah, with Dreadblades, it's kind of like an all-in talent too. I was experimenting on the TR actually with Venthyr Outlaw Rogue. I was just like, oh, maybe that's actually pretty good. But maybe we'll talk about Covenants in just a bit. But wrapping things up with the level 50 tier, you have, I think, one option that kind of stands out, but first option on that tier is Dancing Steel, increases the duration of Blade Fury by 3 seconds and increases damage by 5%. Blade Rush, which is a 45-second cooldown where you charge to your opponent and do some damage, and sometimes that damage gets increased to off targets with Blade Fury. And then Killing Spree, which is a pretty iconic combat/outlaw rogue ability. And you just go around attacking a bunch of targets on a 2-minute cooldown, does some AoE damage. With Blade Fury, it hits harder. So correct me if I'm wrong again, but isn't Blade Rush the primary talent for Outlaw Rogue?
Yeah, Blade Rush kind of doubles as not only an energy regen tool, but as a gap closer. So that's pretty powerful in that regard. So one interesting thing about Dancing Steel is that Blade Flurry has a PvP modifier, so it's increased by 50% in PvP. So, or something like that, maybe 40%. But it echoes 75% of the damage you do, and with Dancing Steel, it increases that to 82.5%. So the cleave damage you can do with Dancing Steel and the 2 melee is actually pretty substantial.
And I've heard, and maybe this is just a rumor, that Blade Flurry goes through like immunities that it probably shouldn't go through. Is that correct? Like your Blade Flurry damage can go through like Tranquility from Druids? Or am I completely wrong on this?
Oh, you're correct, and that's because it can't miss. So things that can't miss, like Ring of Peace, also cannot miss. That's why you can Ring of Peace Tranquility and Turtle as well. So things like that. I know that interrupts don't go through Turtle, but yeah, things like Ring of Peace and Blade Flurry, they will go through that.
Yeah, so this is maybe it's a bug, maybe it's intended, who knows? But yeah, Blade Flurry damage for some reason goes through some forms of immunity. Even maybe that it probably shouldn't. I mean, depending on who you ask. If you ask an Outlaw Rogue, maybe it should. If you don't, I mean, maybe it shouldn't. But yeah, I thought that was a very interesting interaction that many people probably don't know about. If you've ever wondered why you died through Turtle against an Outlaw Rogue, probably because the Blade Flurry damage is going through your powerful defensive cooldown for
Yeah,
some
it usually
reason.
doesn't happen very often. It's kind of situational. If the healer is still CC'd and they're not on top of the healer, and you have something else to attack to cleave off of it, then yeah, it can happen.
Very nice. Sounds good. So Jake, I want you to maybe talk us through some of the PvP talent options. I know Outlaw Rogues have 2 really good ones, but I don't know if you have the Outlaw Rogue calculator up. But Jake, can you walk us through some of the 2 primary options that Outlaw Rogues tend to have in
Yeah, so
Arena?
well, I mean the PvP. I mean, obviously, I know absolutely nothing about Rogue. So, but the two, when I was looking through this earlier, as you guys were talking, the two obviously that popped up for me, especially as obviously Trill, you mentioned this with Restless Blades, is Float Like a Butterfly. Where it also where Restless Blades also now reduces the remaining cooldown of Evasion and Feint. I can't remember what CD Feint is, but it's on quite a low one, isn't it? It's like 7 seconds or something like that.
15 seconds, yep.
15, that's it, yeah. So it must reduce it by quite a significant amount. So you've got that 30% damage reduction quite a bit of the time. And then obviously Enduring Brawler, which is every 3 seconds you remain in combat, you gain 1% stamina and chance for Sinister Strike to hit an additional time. Obviously you lose stacks when you're outside of combat, but max 20 stacks, that's 20% stamina if I'm not mistaken, which obviously makes you significantly more tanky. What else? Well, talk us through first of all those two options, Trill, and then what else would you go for? Whether you'd sort of change things up?
Yeah, that's kind of where Outlaw gets most of the tankiness from. The legendaries help a bit as well, but mainly those two talents. Again, if you're playing Kyrian with a true bearing roll, you can immediately reset Feint after pressing it. So that's kind of one of the stronger interactions. And then Enduring Brawler, standard pick, more damage, more health. Nothing wrong with that. You don't need to play Float Like a Butterfly when you're playing against only casters. So it opens up some other options. Main ones are Dismantle against melee. That's the pretty standard third pick. Drink Up Me Hearties is kind of I would call it a meme pick, but it might start to become a little more popular if that kind of off-healing is required. And then maneuverability. Sprint is reduced by Restless Blades, so you're talking 10, 15 second cooldown sprint sometimes. So constantly breaking out of slows and roots. And then Thick as Thieves is the last one. So I think all rogue specs have this, but since Outlaw plays the Invigorating Shadow Dust legendary, sometimes tricks can have as low as a 10-second cooldown. So this talent, if you're buffing a Fire Mage's Combustion or DK's Abomination Limb, something like that, you're talking a lot of value there when you're going for a kill with tricks.
Sounds like you got like a lot of options, which is quite nice. I feel like you have everything. You can choose what to go for. There's not sort of like a cookie as much of a cookie cutter build at least with like one that's consistent, and then you can choose some others. So they all sound really interesting. Obviously, big what you're talking about with Drink Up Me Hearties, where you've got Iron Stomach and Crimson Vial, and all the healing that's done to your teammates with a sort of dampener spec. It sounds quite interesting. I quite like the idea that the spec itself can be played multiple different ways. I think that's one of the good things about the design at the minute.
Right. I think that there's definitely a lot of stuff you can do with the spec, and I think that's why it's so much fun to play. Because there's, like I said, there's so much you can do.
Just out of curiosity, I don't know if you mentioned Take Your Cut, but I know you've been playing Double Outlaw. Do you guys ever play Take Your Cut as Double Outlaw?
No, haste. Well, haste is one of our better stats. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't affect our globals at all. So it really is not that impactful. If you were trying to buff another person with it, it could be good, but then you're also sacrificing something like Thick as Thieves. So you're really not gaining as much as you think you might.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I think in general, like, it's always interesting going into the PvP talents because there's things that maybe situationally they'd be okay, but there's always kind of like a default build that we typically don't stray too far away from. It's just an interesting observation. Anyway, so we've gone over talents, we've gone over PvP talents. We've kind of already touched a little bit on Covenant. Primarily, you're playing Kyrian at this time, but you talked a little bit about Venthyr. Can you maybe walk us through each Covenant and maybe just focus on the good Covenants and the good options and what sort of benefit they bring to Outlaw Rogue?
Yeah, so the most common pick right now is Kyrian, and the reason for this is not only because of the 7 common point interaction with Restless Blades, but also the mechanical Soulbind. So what this does at the very bottom is the effusive anima accelerator. It will reduce the cooldown of echoing reprimand by 3 seconds per target hit, up to 15 seconds. And it already has a 45-second cooldown. So that's, if you hit 5 targets, that's 30 seconds off the cooldown. And then again, with the legendary you play, that's another 20 seconds when you when you vanish. So you're talking a 10-second cooldown on Echoing Reprimand, which is one of the lowest Covenant cooldown abilities of any class. So very, very powerful. The conduits and stuff are pretty self-explanatory. The only 2 good conduits are Count the Odds and Sleight of Hand. That's about it. But as far as Venthyr goes, you just play the first Soulbind, Naja, and the Covenant itself kind of plays just like a little more burstier. You don't play as much for that consistent kind of like all in your face damage. You're kind of setting up goes and trying to one-shot people the same way other specs do. The other 2 Covenants, sorry,
yeah,
keep going. Necroward and Night Fae are not very common. Necroward is like playable, but definitely not as strong as the other 2. And then Night Fae is not great. They're technically, if sepsis never gets dispelled, it could be okay because of a conduit. If you're constantly resetting the cooldown of sepsis, then you can cast a bunch of extra ambushes, which would give you extra roll the bones buffs. But again, that kind of situation is not very common.
And so just to be clear, so Kyrian is the best, probably by far, because having 7-second cooldown reduction every that's not what is it? Dispatch? Is that your finisher? I can never remember the name of it.
Yeah, that's the Outlaw version of Eviscerate.
Yeah, so having basically 7 seconds off of all your CDs when your primary CDs when you press dispatch seems pretty good. And then again, Venthyr seems like it might be, kind of niche. Again, Venthyr seems to be, because for a lot of specs that can play it, it's kind of like an all-in build. You're kind of investing a lot into a single cooldown. So for Rogue, Flagellation, of course at some point probably we've all played against a Venthyr sub rogue or Venthyr assassination rogue, and it's just kind of the scariest thing imaginable. It's like you have to make sure you don't mess up like this one big interaction, and but if you do, you pretty much just lose the game. But anyway, so Kyrian is the best, and you mentioned the best soulbind is Forge Light Mechanicos. That's of course the one that summons Brawn. Is Brawn at all an impactful thing in Outlaw gameplay?
Well, not typically. However, it's pretty funny when Braun decides to spawn right as somebody uses Leap of Faith and knocks them away. I've had that happen like maybe 2 times so far, where Braun
Nice.
just tries to intercept it. Yep.
It's just a big boy coming out being very annoying.
And then as you mentioned, the biggest reason why Mechanicos is so good is because of the effusive anima accelerator. So every time you press Echoing Reprimand, you can have a chance to lower its cooldown depending on how many targets get hit by its effect. Is that correct?
Yeah. So typically you hit between 1 and 2, but if you're playing against something like an Holy Decay or a Demo Lock or BM Hunter, you can sometimes hit 5 targets with it, and that's when the cooldown reduction starts to become really crazy.
Very nice. And of course, Mechanicos also comes with clamps. Is that something you play in a lot of games?
Yeah, I do play the third potency conduit. So I will play clamps, but I'm never really standing still. It's not really that important. I'm also at work, so it's not very impactful.
I know just from some of the VODs I saw early in the expansion, your team was really big on the clamps. At least Sidu loved the clamps back when he was playing Holy Paladin in season 1.
It did get cut in half, so it used to be 30%.
Okay.
Now it's only 15. But that was like the only way we could actually survive at the start of the season in season 1 without trinketing. Was the
Very
clamps
nice.
and just we were just playing stand still.
Nice. So I want to talk about legendaries really quick. So there's I, two main legendaries that you typically run as Outlaw Rogue. The first is the Greenskin legendary, which is essentially just more burst and it gives you a bigger pistol shot damage. And then invigorating Shadow Dust, which when you use Vanish, all of your cooldowns get reset by 20 seconds, which is why sometimes you see rogues are able to double kidney, because they'll kidney shot, and kidney shot is a 20-second cooldown. They'll vanish, and so it'll reset all 20 seconds of that cooldown, and they can kidney shot another target. So walk us through both of those legendaries and which one do you think is kind of best in each situation?
Yeah, so the greenskin one, what it does is it kind of covers Outlaw's weakness a little bit by giving the extra burst. I mean, I've seen as high as 25k pistol shots sometimes if it crits. So it can definitely be pretty bursty. But yeah, the main one that people are playing in threes is Invigorating Shadow Dust, as I said, because it reduces the cooldowns on all your abilities. That's not just what's on Restless Blade. That's all of them. So that's Cloak, Blind, Kitty Shot, Dismantle, Echo Reprimand, everything. So yeah, that's why that legendary is so powerful, because Restless Blades reduces the cooldown to Vanish. So you can have the Vanish cooldown as low as 20 to 30 seconds. So every 20 to 30 seconds, you're reducing the cooldown of all your other abilities by 20 seconds. So imagine if you have the right roll up, that you just have permanent 100% cooldown reduction. Like it's a pretty crazy interaction. You can have Blind on a 50-second cooldown, Cloak on a 1-minute cooldown. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It's kind of funny because all basically, if you've been listening this whole time, you've probably been thinking to yourself, "Wow, Outlaw Rogue is pretty complicated." And I think honestly, yeah, it's a very complicated spec. I mean, it's I mean, you've obviously played many different specs throughout your career. I mean, has anything come as complex as Outlaw Rogue? Because to me, it just sounds like incredibly complex. With the skill cap of it is just like insane. I mean, do you think it has like a really high skill cap?
I do think it has a really high skill cap. I think if you're really using all the cooldowns to their max every single time they're up, it's actually really difficult to do, because there are so many ways you can use them. So you're not always going to pick the best way to use it. So making sure you're actually picking the best way to use them uh, might cost you time, right? To think about what's the best, and so then you're actually losing time on your cooldowns because you're thinking about something else, right? So in
Yeah.
that sense, there's a lot to think about and decide on the fly. So thinking quickly is very important when you're playing this spec. I don't think it's like necessarily the most complicated spec. I think it's up there, but I think there are other classes that have several ways out of each situation. I think Windwalker's probably up there as well in terms of like how many things you can do with the class. It's kind of one of those jack of all trades classes as well. Um, I think a really good Warlock and Mage and stuff are also classes that if you are really thinking about 2 steps ahead of your opponent, then you can really outplay them.
It's interesting. It's quite a big difference in comparison to I suppose Kidney Shot, Sepsis, Vendetta, and just walk away from the keyboard.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of funny where you can see an assassination rogue just shiv sepsis vanish and take his hand on the keyboard, and someone will die to it.
Those clips actually make me laugh. I'm crying and laughing at the same time. I'm trying not to suffer too much or go overboard, but they are. It kind of actually reminds me of when I can't remember when this was. It must like correct me if because you'll know this, Trill, whether it was in season 1 of Shadowlands or another season in like BFA or something, but where I think it might be in BFA where Ghost Wolf healing was so strong, and there was a clip of Seelu just like he just put himself into Ghost Wolf, got up, went to go get his kids something, and then just came back and he was still fine because the healing from Ghost Wolf was so big. I can't remember if that was BFA
Yeah,
or
that was BFA season 1. Yep.
yeah,
Pack
that was
Spirit.
Pack Spirit. That was it. It was hilarious.
And the best part was it was like an inner ring trait. Like those are supposed to be like the weak kind of like utility traits, and it was just a healing trait, and it was just the strongest trait in the game.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. It's nuts, and I think there are certain interactions in this game that kind of is nuts, and something that kind of that I do recognize, obviously, as someone like as someone that doesn't play rogue or doesn't play mage or other classes like that, is that there is a skill cap to certain aspects of it, and obviously listening to you guys talk about Outlaw Rogue and the interactions and everything, I'm finding myself, even though I've played this game for a very, very long time, almost lost in kind of like trying to kind of keep up with it as someone that doesn't play Rogue, because there just seems so much. So if anyone ever complains about it, just remember it's difficult to play. So if someone's doing very well and they're crushing with you, you gotta tip the hat.
Yeah, I think there's a few select specs in WoW that are just like impossible to play perfectly as a human being. Like I think, for instance, Feral Druid is one of those specs that just has like an enormously difficult DPS rotation that kind of, it involves snapshotting, which is pretty unique. I think it's unique exclusively to Feral. I don't think anything else snapshots in the game. In any case, like Feral Druid, Outlaw Rogue, maybe probably like Affliction Warlock, in some respects probably Fire Mage. Like there's all these specs that they have so much complexity in their rotation that, or the potential of what they could do in any given moment in arena, that it's like it's impossible. It's impossible to know what the correct thing to do is. As Trill was mentioning, like the moment you start thinking about what cooldown to press next as an Outlaw Rogue, you've already kind of fallen behind. Like if a robot was to play Outlaw Rogue perfectly, it wouldn't have this problem. But because we're human, we have some latency inherent to our brain. It's just like impossible to play these things perfectly. And I think Outlaw Rogue is like a really good example of that. Is just there's so much complexity, so much math that's involved in the spec that it's just really difficult, if not impossible, to play perfect. And so, it's funny because, people tend to see specs like Outlaw and they're like, oh, that looks easy. All you need to do is press Sinister Strike. But no, it's like you have to do math when you're playing this spec. It's not that easy. It's pretty crazy how far you can push a spec. In any case, just me ranting a little bit or going on a tangent. One thing that's added to the complexity of Outlaw, and I guess many other specs in season 3, are tier set bonuses. So, Jake, can you describe the 2 tier set bonuses for Outlaw Rogue and see what Trill has to say about them?
Yeah, so they're both called Tornado Trigger, just in case you're interested in that one. But the 2 set is your main gouge, which is I don't know. Well, that's just a regular
mastery.
Mastery, yeah.
That's your mastery. Yeah, has a 25% chance to fire a pistol shot, so that's automatic, right? I assume. And then the 4 set is pistol shot, has a 100% chance to load a hidden bullet from up your sleeves, up to 6 times. After loading 6 bullets, your next pistol shot also fires between the eyes, as though 6 combo points were spent. So, Trill, do you want to walk us through the 2 set and the 4 set?
Yeah, so the 2 set, so main gosh is your mastery. It's a 30% chance from your main hand attacks to trigger an attack with your offhand. So that's like Sinister Strike, the triple threat conduit, ghostly strike, stuff like that. Will proc this mastery, and that is a 25% chance to proc a pistol shot. That does very low damage, but it will generate combo points, and will count towards your 4 sets. So it's still a very, very powerful bonus. However, it actually can break you out of your own vanish. So that's kind of unfortunate if it happens to proc, but not very common. However, the 4 set attacks up to 6 times. You actually need to manually cast Pistol Shot to trigger the Between the Eyes, but the Between the Eyes will actually reduce the cooldowns of all your other abilities because it risks blades. So again, it's a pretty strong bonus in the right circumstances.
Nice. And I know Between the Eyes is kind of one of your more it's you don't use Between the Eyes for burst, right? It's just like a maintenance debuff you keep on the target and gives you 20% additional crit chance. Is that correct?
Well, if you're playing the Greenskin Legendary, it actually is a versatile because it procs the Legendary, and it actually will also proc the Legendary. The 4 set will proc the Legendary, so there's a bit of synergy there as well, so that kind of makes that legendary a little bit better in that sense.
Very nice.
Yeah, so you can basically cast your own between the eyes. Yeah, then use the pistol shot, and that pistol shot will prot another between the eyes, which you can then use it on another pistol shot. So that's kind of where that burst comes from.
Nice. And then, of course, if you want to do maximum damage, maximum burst, you're going to have the correct stats on your gear. You're going to have to itemize correctly. So what is the current stat priority for Outlaw Rogue in Season 3?
Yeah, it's just versatility and then haste, crit, and mastery. Mastery is what you want to absolutely avoid because mastery doesn't increase the chance that your mastery will proc. It just only increases the damage that it does, and it's not a very significant source of damage. It's not worth stacking the stat to try and increase it at all. So it's mainly just crit and haste, but more so haste over crit.
Nice. And then, are there any soft caps on haste, or do you want to just stack it as high as possible?
No, haste is kind of it's like slightly devalued as Kyrian just because of how quick the spec is already and how many less like center strikes you cast because of how many like finishers you cast at low combo points due to the end of charge system. But it's still better than crit, I think, just because crit is slightly devalued in PvP due to the modifier on it.
Nice. And then you said you were playing Orc. Do you think that's the best racial on Horde, and what is the best racial on Alliance?
So Night Elf is not that great for Outlaw just because you're not based on stealth nearly as much as Assassination. Being able to meld for a Garrote silence as Assassination is really good, and just the way sub plays, you want to reset constantly. Being able to meld, re-stealth, and get away from the enemy team is pretty good. But the best racial on Alliance for Outlaw would definitely be Human, just to play the Relentless and just be even harder to CC while still having that 3-minute stun break to, the oh crap, I'm in trouble button.
Nice. And then Jake, why don't you talk about the next section? We're going to talk about what comps Outlaw Rogues can play.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I was just thinking something as well, just slightly off topic. Looking through all of this stuff, like the talents and everything, legendaries and tier piece, it just reminds me of sort of, I don't know what you guys think about this, but like just the amount of borrowed powers that we have and the complexity of everything, like the soul binds, conduits, everything that kind of comes in with Shadowlands. There's just so many options. I just think, wouldn't it be nice if there was just if it was just all a bit simpler sometimes? Just like just I get on, I have to get this gear, and then I press the buttons that I use. Like it feels like all of this stuff that they've got now would be really useful in the new Dragonflight talent tree as well. That was just a thought I had because it's just there's just so much you have to kind of know. It's crazy especially for new players.
Yeah, I mean, there's Confidence, Conduits, Soulbinds, all this stuff, legendaries. Yeah, you have to think about instead of just being talents. Talents and gear. That's what it used to be. So
yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, that's. I suppose that's probably what most people have enjoyed about TBC and what they will enjoy with Wrath. Just it's sort of your gear, talents. You got your gems, you got your enchants and everything that you can kind of min max and whatever. But there's other than that, it's just that's all you've got. There's nothing else really.
I remember I was talking to Swapsy a few months ago, and he said something very funny. He said because this is like around the time that TBC Classic was. I think it was season 1 of TBC Classic, and people are a bit pessimistic about Shadowlands at the time. People are always kind of pessimistic about the current expansion. But Swapsy said the reason I like playing TBC is it's just my spellbook and me. You open your spellbook, you see what the spells do, and that's what you expect. You don't have to like go through all these soul binds and all these conduits. You just open up your spellbook, and there is your class.
Yeah.
It's very telegraphed.
you just play the game.
Yes,
exactly.
You just play the game.
Instead of playing the systems, you're playing the game.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's the dream. I mean, copium for next expansion, but if not, then I'll be very deep into Wrath. But anyways, back on topic. So comps in twos. I have a guess. I'm just gonna say it's probably Outlaw Holy Priest. But sort of what works best in your opinion, Trill? What would you go for?
Oh, that's a weird guess. Yeah, definitely Outlaw Holy Priest number one, no question there. Outlaw Reso Druid also very good. Not so much Outlaw Mage actually. Outlaw does not work very well with a mage in twos. You're kind of limited to sub in that regard, because you're trying to not run away as Outlaw because that's how your class works. You need to be constantly attacking to reduce the cooldowns, and if you don't have a healer, it's kind of hard to do that. So I think the only thing you could really make work with that is actually the double Outlaw Rogue in twos even. With the double Iron Stomach, the double Drink Up Me Hearties talents. Maybe that could see some more play. I'm not sure. I haven't really seen too much of it, but I saw Palomar and Calvish. They went like 42-1, I think. That's that. So
Nice.
that was pretty entertaining to watch. But
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, sort of would if I mean that there's synergy there, right? That we were talking about earlier. And I'm guessing they wouldn't. I mean, would you tricks? Would you still use the tricks PvP for that? No, just
no.
healing stuff.
Yeah, you would need to run the defensive talents to stay alive, which would include the other two, and then drink up. So no room for tricks there.
There's a lot of same class 42-0s going on. Zaryu and Mitch Jones as well doing their sort of arcane mage 42-0.
Yeah, they've done arcane and fire. They just need to do frost now.
Yeah, I was watching that today actually. Very interesting. I was saying that they should once they've done that on NA, they should come over and do it on EU just to kind of get like I don't know, like some sort of that'd be quite cool actually. Just getting like we've done it on NA, now we go conquer EU. That'd be really fun.
It's funny, like if people tend to flame that, like, oh, they'd probably drop their MMR in order to do this, but it's still pretty impressive. Like in Shadowlands, like even games at 1800 are just really, really hard. Like even if you're a rank 1 player, you kind of have to try pretty hard. Like in a lot of games, once you hit a certain threshold. I was just like thinking, like, is there any class that could potentially do a 42-0 challenge without dropping MMR? And maybe Double Feral could do it. I don't know, like what would be capable of actually doing that.
I mean, I think it's either a survival or outlaw. I think are the only two classes that could do it.
You think so? You think Double Rogue for sure could do it without resetting MMR?
I don't think Double Rogue could. I said I think either survival Holy Priest or outlaw Holy Priest. It would be the two most likely.
Okay, I see. But I mean, if you're to play with something that's identical to you, like if you had to play with, like, I was thinking, what would be the bet? Like it would probably be Feral Druid, like Double Feral.
Maybe Double Feral. I don't think Double Hunter would do it. Maybe Double Windwalker if in the right season. I don't think this season is the right season for that, but Double
Yeah.
Windwalker has been pretty strong in the past.
Yeah.
Maybe Double Warlock actually.
Yeah, that was it. I've seen Double Warlock. I mean, you could do like a Destro Athlete sort of situation or double Athlete. I mean, they're pretty hard to kill sometimes with their drain life, and they get their stuff rolling and everything. And you're playing with Resolve. There can be something really cool there.
Yeah, if you land a Soul Rot and then you double drain life, you're basically full HP instantly. So that's pretty strong. It depends if you're able to kind of outlast people without a healer.
Yeah. Sadly, no double Ellie, but we'll dream. We'll dream.
I actually do think Rogue Mage. That's actually no. We're talking about double same class. Sorry. Yeah, there's a couple of class combos that could do it. But I think double Windwalker, double Rogue, double. Pearl.
Weirdly, I did a 42-0 in season 1 of Shadowlands playing Unholy DK Windwalker, and on the last game, a warrior ran in and one-shot me. So the Windwalker, I literally walked to the right. It was in Robodrome. I walked to the right up to the ramp and popped my stuff, and then just got flattened. and and then my friend who was on the Windwalk, I literally had to do a 2v1, and we won it, so we managed to do it, which was crazy at the time. But I felt so embarrassed because I was like, was they playing totally fine? I was getting rogues out with the Abomination. I felt so good, and then this last one, I lasted 5 seconds. So yeah, it was pretty embarrassing. But they're always fun. I love doing 42-0s.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked about 2s. What about 3s? Obviously, Outlaw RMP is going to be a big contender, probably for the AWC coming up. Is there anything else? Obviously talk us through Outlaw RMP, but is there anything else that you might run?
Yeah, we've done a bit of experimenting. Yeah, double rogue is a possibility, I would say. The other stuff we've done like okay with, probably not like tournament level comps, but there's been like we played Outlaw Rep, we played Outlaw Frost DK, did okay with that. Outlaw Arms Warrior was okay. I was playing a bit earlier in the season. I was playing a little bit of Outlaw BM Hunter was pretty good. I'm sure other stuff could work with it as well. Like I saw a Outlaw Destruction team was like very high rated, and then also I saw an Outlaw Ellie team even at 2.8. So definitely a lot of variety.
Yeah, I mean Outlaw Ellie. I think it's Cowboy Cleave or something like that. Sort of the lasso and the cowboy. I've heard that's the name. But yeah, no, I was thinking about that earlier on in the season. It's been quite cool. But that's nice. I like it when you can play stuff when there's like I suppose a diversity of comps, which is always quite fun to see. And I'm really hoping that maybe we see something that is quite interesting at the AWC. Obviously, you don't have to tell us your secret strats, going in a couple of weeks. But do you think it is going to be mostly Outlaw RMP, at least in NA?
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I do think that two teams could maybe run like the Outlaw Distro, but I think that it's probably going to be mostly RMP still.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to say though was that Outlaw Ellie was actually one of the comps that won the AWC in Legion. That was Outlaw's primary comp back in Legion and at the start of BFA was the Outlaw Ellie.
Yeah, I actually I didn't even know that. That's crazy. I actually didn't know that. So consider me learned today on that front. I'll have to go back and have a look at that. But yeah, I think the one for me, I actually remember when you guys won. Was it early? It was early BFA from the kind of Legion that sort of era of that whole journey was the part of that I remember the most because I didn't play too much of Legion, so it's kind of like when you guys won your first sort of championship. That was when I kind of really got back into the game, and I just thought that was really it was an interesting time period just because I had no idea about the competitive scene until then, or at least I hadn't watched too much of it. So that was kind of my introduction. I kind of heard some stuff, so I'll have to go back and watch some of that. So thank you so much for letting me know about that, Trill.
Yeah, that was if you want to look it up, it's the summer finals of 2018. That was when they played Outlaw Ellie. It was Waz, Swapsy, and Chaz, I believe.
Sounds dope. Perfect combination. So, okay, I think the last thing that we're going to be doing on this whole subject of analysis about Outlaw Rogues, I think one thing you would change that, right, Big?
Yeah, so this is always a very open-ended question. If you could change anything about the game, maybe related to Outlaw Rogues, doesn't have to be, but if you could change anything related to World of Warcraft, if you had an unlimited budget, Blizzard said, okay, you can do one thing to the game, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, that's definitely a loaded question, but I would definitely say kind of tone down the amount of cooldown reduction that's in the game. Yeah, I think the classes in their current dates are way too reliant on cooldowns, just because of how we've seen how powerful they are in this expansion. You see Combustion, Conch Banner from Warriors. There's Wings from Rep Hellies. Even Windwalker cooldowns are very strong. Every single class, pretty much, maybe Shadow Priest, has a very strong set of cooldowns. So kind of going back to that, kind of sustain, trying to actually attack each other. Not just running away, playing a waiting game. Oh, I did my go. Now I wait 1 minute to do another go. I think that's really boring gameplay. I think it's really fun when you're actually both actively trying to win the game. And that happens very rarely in Shadowlands, because it's not worth trying to win the game without your cooldowns. So, Outlaw is probably one of the main offenders of that. Actually, is just because of how reliant on cooldowns the class is. So, toning that down a bit, but also extending that to other classes again, like Fire Mage, Repelli, making those cooldowns still worth pressing, but not to the point where if they're up, you're just dead if you don't immediately react. That's why weak auras became so prevalent this expansion. Was if you didn't immediately bubble or trinket whenever rep helps divine toll, you just die. Or combustion, fireball, pyroblast, fireblast, dead. So those types of situations, I just think shouldn't exist, and I think that we should move back to not necessarily a slower pace, but a more manageable pace of arena.
When was
Very
the
nice.
last time you remember that being the case?
Like the one shotty.
No, the sort of like a time period. Like we were talking, you're saying about things being so like people would come in with their cooldowns being so major, and then they just run and then wait for cooldowns and then come back in. Like, is there a time period where you remember where things were like just like when was the last time you really felt in WoW that you were sort of things felt manageable? There were people's cooldowns were big, but they weren't sort of like as terrifying as they are now. Is there a time period that you can remember?
I mean, the last time was probably season 1 of BFA. Actually, was probably the last time that it actually felt like people were trying to play, but it wasn't like cooldowns meant instant death, and you could still win games in a reasonable manner. It was still pretty slow paced in general, but it wasn't like at a snail pace. It wasn't like season 2 of BFA. PFA was probably one of the first expansions where like stamina scaling was really not in line with damage scaling. So season 2 and season 3 were very slow paced compared to the first season, but then season 4 was kind of crazy again, just because of corruptions and mages with a 2-second cast GPI and chaos bolt under 1 second and everything like that. So that kind of sped it up again, but I think in the wrong way. So Legion, I think, was the last time that Blizzard really did like active class tuning in arena with templates, and that was actually one of the main benefits of the templates. I think was making certain classes have a certain amount of one stat. Like if mages had too much haste, they could DB poly you through relentless or something like that. And so and not being able to do certain things, that was when they nerfed Dragon's Breath actually from a 4-second to a 3-second disorient, which made that impossible unless you had like haste effect. But I think there's actually a middle ground there where you could have players like choose the stats in their template, but not force people to have a certain stat like balance, I guess. But yeah, Legion was kind of the last time, like I said, where they were actively tuning classes each season, and the seasons were short enough to where you could have a season be a specific when the next season is actually different because they changed something, because they haven't done that much in Shadowlands.
No, they haven't. No, they haven't. That's very true. Well, that's interesting because I do feel the same way on that front, at least on the PvP front. Alrighty, well that's good to know. Big, what about you? What's the one thing that you would change?
Actually, I'm currently finishing up a video all about MMR inflation, and it's kind of funny because MMR, like rating inflation, is kind of tied with reward, like the reward system in WoW in many different ways, and the race to rank 1. There's so many different parts of the game that inflation is supposed to sort of fix and correct. But I think if not to spoil my video too much, but I think the rating inflation we saw last season was a bit too extreme, and I think it had at the time unintended consequences for everyone on the ladder, and I think throughout the rest of the expansion it will continue to have effects on the ladder. So I think right now my answer is that I think something should be done to redirect incentives for queuing arena in World of Warcraft. I don't know what that would look like, but I don't think MMR, like dramatic MMR inflation, is the way to change player incentives. And I know, Jake, we talked about this privately, but yeah, I think right now, not to just advertise the video I'm making that's going to come out probably in 2 weeks, which you should definitely watch, but I think that for sure something probably needs to be done with the reward system in WoW to make it more fair, more fun, and make it more engaging for every player throughout the ladder.
Whoops! I just accidentally closed my. Okay, one sec.
Try and resend it to me.
Hey,
Working on it.
he vanished in the need grade pass, and he decided to pop it.
Trill's just resetting his cooldown.
Oopsies.
Yeah.
It's all good.
We're back.
We're back.
All right, sorry about that.
No worries, no stress. Yeah, Big. That's I'm definitely looking forward to your video on that one because that's going to be interesting. Not just because I've weighed my own opinion on that, but because it sounds very interesting. I think for myself, I think the thing that I would change is design of classes. I think simplicity in terms of as we talked about earlier, not having as many modifiers to have to worry about, legendaries, conduits, soulbinds that we all talked about, returning to that simplicity, especially with talent trees and options there would be amazing for me, and sort of having a bit more ingenuity in terms of the talents and what kind of abilities we have. Like, for example, I don't know if I talked about this last time, but Ice Wall, for example, is an amazing PvP talent that, in my opinion, just should be baseline. You should have this stuff in there so that you can use it in PvE and in PvP as a way. I don't know, it just sounds really interesting, like blocking off, a certain boss or blocking off certain minions or something to kind of help you out in PvE, or I don't know, something along those lines. It just sounds like fun. Like, even if it isn't helpful, it sounds fun. And I think that's what we're sort of missing in World of Warcraft at the minute. It's just that I want to feel like I'm having fun with this class fantasy again. And with something that's more simple and there's not as many like modifiers that sort of attracting it. But I mean, that would be the one thing I'd change.
I definitely agree on the modifiers part. I think the cooldown stacking, becomes a problem whenever there's this many in the game, and especially when you add on things like you said, conduit, soulbinds. There's actually just so many modifiers on some of these abilities that before they nerfed it. I mean, like a prot warrior, right? You're talking like a 3K shield slam turns into an 80K shield slam, then just out of nowhere, it's like, okay, how'd that happen? So then you have to go and dig through it and like, okay, 50% there, 200% there, 100% there. It's like, okay, well, why is this all there? Why can't it just be, a bit more relaxed? So definitely agree
Exactly.
there.
It's the interactions. It's sort of where has this come from? It does make you think about the sort of the way that Blizzards are handling balancing and stuff like that. It's sort of, are there people that go and look through this for special interactions, and whether or not there should be some testers for on a sort of a realm for them to figure out, like, to go out there and try loads of different things to see if there are any weird interactions, because it comes through and it just sort of like, as you were saying, how does that even happen? Where does it come from? And obviously it's these multiple different modifiers that just stack and stack and stack, and it just shouldn't be that case. And I don't think the design should really work that way.
Yeah, and I do think that the Dragonflight talent trees should hopefully reduce that a bit, because they should probably be cutting down. Like, I imagine they'll make some new ones that are maybe hopefully less complex, but still keep some of the ones that are interesting and fun to play with from the current talent tree. And then I'm sure some of the current like conduits and soulbinds will turn into passives, right? But you won't be able to pick all of them. So hopefully that's kind of the balancing factor there, is that you're kind of limited in what you can pick, but that's kind of where the fun comes in. You pick your own build, and then that's kind of what you separate yourself from others with.
Exactly. Yeah, the Dragonflight stuff looks good. I know that I think Convoke is on there. I saw that one on the on the sort of example trees, and I like the idea that, and I think that was something that people were saying as well. We go from expansion to expansion, but we lose some of the things we had on the way. I mean, the one for me that sticks out is obviously in Legion, Elemental Shaman got Stormkeeper, and that's now become baseline as opposed to on the Legion Artifact weapon, and it's such a integral part of Elemental now that it's sort of like if I didn't have it, I wouldn't feel like I'm even in playing my class really as much. It's a very weird thing kind of going to TBC and playing Elemental, because it's sort of, I've played Stormkeeper for 3 expansions now. It sort of feels like it should be there and stay there. So it's interesting. I think it would be nice to have that ability to kind of choose stuff that we've had. Like, for example, Mind Games is probably one of the best abilities to come out from Shadowlands, in my opinion. I think it's a really cool interaction and makes it interesting to kind of play against or have to go against. So
I think that's pretty cool. And obviously the elemental mastery, at least in Wrath, kind of works the same way. You currently have to have nature swiftness on TBC as elite, but in Wrath they actually kind of merge that into elite mastery. So it doubles as a haste increase, but also as an instant like level burst chain lightning. So
yes,
kind of get one, just not as often.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we've got the 3 things that we would change. I suppose we should get on to the next segment, which is our PvP news.
All right. Who ordered up an extra large can of whoop ass?
Okay, so I think the 13th to the 15th of May, we've got the MDI China group, or the obviously English rebroadcast. I think Long Ming won first place, earning their spot in the grand finals. And then on the 20th to the 22nd of May, so very recently, we had the Last Stand tournament, which I remember from last time. This is when all of the MDI groups get together, or the ones that haven't gone through, and duke it out one more time to get a spot in the grand finals as well. So big congrats to W Omega LOL for winning their first place and getting the last spot into the MDI Grand Finals. I've actually got a question for you, Trill. When you get in the hat trick, dude, when are you gonna go out and win MDI?
I don't know. It depends on if the current AWC team ever decides to call it quits. But one funny thing, I actually played in the last Great Push tournament with Dr. J. He's actually on the W Megalol team. So that was a fun experience. We didn't win, but I think we put up good times in some dungeons. So it was fun.
That's good, because I feel like that would be it. Like, race the world first, AWC victory, and then MDI. That would be the hat trick. But
yeah, I think I could compete in MDI if I actually tried and had a team for it. But it's way too much time, and I definitely want to compete in the AWC while there's a reason for me to.
Exactly. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Alrighty, so the next one is we had the Method Mayhem NA Gauntlet. That was an RBG tournament that happened on the 21st to the 22nd as well. Big congrats to Team Camel for taking the first place and winning the lion's share of the $2,750. I really butchered that. $2,750 prize pool. So that's really awesome. Big, do you want to take it away for the rest?
Yeah, so we had some hot fixes recently, nothing really PvP related. And on top of that, Blizzard announced that the new arena that I think is launching with next patch, called the Enigma Crucible, will no longer have pillars that go up and down by pressing a button. Instead, the pillars will remain statically in place in theory throughout the entire arena game. I was honestly slightly disappointed about this. I miss so much Ring of Valor. I know people had different opinions about Ring of Valor, as kind of you either hated it or you loved it. I'm definitely on the camp that I do miss Ring of Valor, just because I like that interaction of pillars going up and down. So I was kind of sad to see this news that they're gonna keep the pillars dynamically up in this arena. I mean, essentially, it just looks like another flat, arena, Nagran sort of Tolvaron style arena, where just a lot of empty open space. I like those arenas too, but I was a bit sad to see that the pillars won't go up and down. Anyway,
about that arena, actually, I have a question about it. How many pillars are there? I thought there was like only one in the middle.
Yeah, look by just looking at the pictures, it looked like there was only supposed to be one pillar in the middle of the arena, but maybe like it looks like there's like kind of like a honeycomb design in the center of the arena. So maybe when you press the button, random pillars would activate in the center. Who knows? I don't know what their intention was. It looks like though that there's like a honeycomb design and just random pillars would pop up when you press the button.
I hope that it's not as bright as the
Yeah.
Syrian domain.
Empyrean domain, yeah. So we all get blinded every time we see that arena. Um, on the TPC side of things, I guess season rewards and titles were delayed. There's some as a post clarifying how long they would stay on the mailbox. Uh, do you have any information about that, Trill? I know you're playing some TPC. Did they release titles for season 3 on TPC
Yeah,
yet?
they went out on NA today, and yeah, the Drake is only in the mailbox for 1 day after you log in for your title.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, if you don't pick it up immediately, then it'll go away.
That seems like a problem. um, on the PTR side of things, the 9.2.5 PTR build was set as a release candidate. Not sure exactly what this means. It could indicate that 9.2.5 might be closer than we might think. Of course, 9.2.5 is going to be a pretty big patch, primarily because of cross-faction arenas. That's definitely probably going to change arena for, I mean, in my opinion, the better. But there's going to be some crazy combinations, with orc racial, human racial, night elf, undead. These big PvP racials are going to have, sort of increase a different dynamic next patch because of cross faction arenas. Of course, also there's going to be that new arena map we just discussed earlier, and then some class changes that are coming. There's going to be a buff to anti-magic zone in PvP, and warlocks are going to lose demon armor as a PvP talent. So kind of interesting changes. I'm sure there's more to come, but anyway, 925 PTR is definitely exciting, and I'm personally excited for that patch. I've been playing Alliance this whole expansion, and I can tell you just personally that it's very difficult to find queues compared to Horde. So being able to queue my Night Elf Druid and Night Elf Priest with people who are Horde is going to be an amazing experience. Um, Again, though, there's also some AWC events coming up. Again, I believe is it this weekend? That's yeah.
Yep.
The circuit starts on the 20th of May, so of course be on the lookout for that. Trill is going to be playing in that. You might see him on Outlaw. You probably will see him on Outlaw Rogue, which will be really exciting. And then, as we mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, there was an announcement for a cross-region tournament, which seems pretty exciting, if you ask me. And we all kind of agreed to that. That's going to be a very exciting experience. Probably more information to come in the future regarding that. But that's all the WoW news we had for today. Again, if you have any more WoW news, be sure to send it to us either on Twitch chat or tweet us on Twitter, or just send us a mail in the mailbox or something. Who knows? Whatever your desired source of communication is. We'd love to hear if any new PvP news within the community. Now, of course, is the time for our shout-outs, which is, always a fun time. Trill, we're going to start with you. Is there anyone you want to shout out this week?
Well, I wanted to add one more thing actually about
Oh.
really couldn't really get in there earlier, but we were talking about the DK AMZ change. It's actually going to end up being a nerf because the talent currently makes it so that AMZ will produce 80% of magic damage taken with the talent, which is obviously a very strong pick into the current mage lock meta casters. But not having the option of that talent, again, is going to be an offensive buff, but a defensive nerf, and they're actually already struggling against casters as melee. So be on the lookout for that, because I'm actually pretty sure DKs are going to be much worse now against that kind of Deathborn Dark Soul onslaught.
Yeah, I feel that.
It's well, this all circles back to what we were talking about with like the complexity of the game. Like it seems like a buff, but it's actually a nerf, and that has a lot to do with PvP modifier. Like there's all these like things that are affecting your spells that you don't even know about, which is kind of, again, pretty funny. Again, though, so shoutouts. Trill, do you have any shoutouts for this week?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I just want to shout out Team Liquid. I mean, they've just been absolutely incredible to work with and to play for, and hopefully we can do that justice in the upcoming circuit. We're looking forward to playing in it. Also, shout out to my guild on TBC Classic and Benediction, Envy. We just cleared Sunwell this past week. Second week cleared. It's not bad. But yeah,
Amazing. Congrats on the Sunwell clear, of course.
yeah. Thank you.
Big, do you want to go?
Yeah. For me, jeez, I never know who to shout out.
We shout out so many people though. That's the problem. There's too many people that have been shouted out now.
There's too many people. Shout out to myself. How about that? It's self-love is good, right? I've without unloading any trauma, I've gone through some tough times in the past few months, and I shout out to myself for having the resilience to carry on and queue next, and continue grinding in this world. And so shout out to myself. It might sound a bit weird, but you gotta give yourself some praise every now and then.
No, I vibe it, dude. I vibe it. You got to do what you got to do. I mean, you've got to. My advice is just you take the life lessons that PS0 teaches you, which is 2 losses and then next, and that's it. You got to move forward.
I love PS0.
Okay, my shout out then. I guess I'm going to shout out my teammate Ray-Ban, who has been consistently coming home from work and queuing with me, even though we lose sometimes. Maybe a lot more times that we lose, but it's still fun to have someone to queue with, even when the game can feel a little bit dead. So shout out to him. Actually, you know what? I'm going to shout out all my arena partners, Orcs, Heaven as well. Thank you guys for queuing with me, even when I do queue on Alliance. So I appreciate you guys. So thank you so much. And I guess that's it. Trill, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you, like, social media, stream, everything?
Yeah, my Twitch is twitch.tv/TrillTKO, and then my Twitter, which I use once in a blue moon, is twitter.com/TrillTKOWW.
Amazing. And Big, could you list off where our listeners can reach us?
Yeah, so you can contact us directly with a tweet to @technically_PvP or by an email to technicallypvp@gmail.com. You can also join our discussions on the Warcraft Radio Discord.
Also, you can visit the Warcraft Radio website to find the podcast directory with us and many other great shows at www.warcraftradio.com. This new directory also has a review system, so head over there and tell everyone what you think of your favorite shows, and especially tell them about us.
Yeah, and so links to everything we discussed today will be in the show notes. We want to thank all of you guys for listening, and we'll chat with you next time. Until then, good night, and we're going to be vanishing off in just a moment.
Good night.